Hello, welcome to Oxford History Today. I'm your host, Ron Brock, and for the last few weeks we've been kind of looking at Oxford's history, and I thought that we would start this week to take a look at all the different sections that we have here in the museum. I think the first section we'll start with will be the parlor where I'm sitting. And the parlor was kind of a formal room back then. Kids didn't play in it. You weren't in it every day of the week. It was pretty much a Sunday afternoon place where the family would gather and entertain themselves or entertain guests. Back then, and I'm talking in the 18th century, from the mid-18th century, 1800s to the early 1900s, of course we had no electricity then, and so to find things to amuse themselves, they had to do things for themselves, play instruments, read, sing. Another thing that came out was a stereoscope, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But today we're going to have a couple members of our society here. One's going to be playing some of these older instruments, and another one's going to demonstrate the early phonographs that we have in the museum. To start in the parlor here, let's kind of take a look at what we have here as far as furnishings. You've got an old horsehair settee here, and they used to actually use horsehair for their upholstery. It was very durable, lasting, and they wouldn't wear it out sitting on it. We have a gas lamp here, which uses a white gas, and that's similar to what you use in your Coleman lanterns or your Coleman cooking stoves. And again, it was kind of a fire hazard. You had to pour the gas into it for one thing, then pump up some pressure in it and light it. But that was basically all you had for lights, that or candles or maybe a kerosene lamp. We have some instruments here. We have an old cello. That is one thing that would be played here. And on the other side over here, we have a pump organ. Very ornate. These things are really great, and it's fun to listen to them. And one of the things that we have here is a stereoscope. Now, just recently they start coming out with 3D movies like it was really a big deal, and the first, if you will, of the 3Ds. But that's not the case. These stereoscopes were actually 3D. And you would have a whole set of cards that you would look at, and you would view each one of them through the stereoscope. They took a picture, and it was at slightly a different angle, and therefore when you looked at them together, it would form a 3D picture. And these were actually the forerunner of the Viewmaster. People my age, probably as kids, remember having the little Viewmasters that had a little wheel of pictures on them, and you'd click the clicker and they would go through, and they look 3D, they look real. So let's take a look at a stereoscope here. Okay, yeah, here's the stereoscope. As you can see, you have a couple lenses that you would look through. Here's your card. This slide went back and forth to get it into focus so that it was truly a three-dimensional view that you saw. And like I said earlier, you would have a whole deck of cards, and you would just take a look at each one and go through them. They're kind of fun to look at it, and they're pretty common today. You can find them at antique stores and flea markets and things like that, and the cards, you can find quite a few of them. So they're kind of fun to have and fun to look at. We'll put him back over here. The couple items we have here also are these old clocks. There's a couple of them here, and they're both a pendulum-driven clock. This one is actually weight-driven. There's two weights in there that you crank, and it raises the weights up. And as it ticks, the weight comes down. That's what actually drives the clock. And this one runs for about a day, and then you've got to rewind it. This clock over here, which they call a shelf clock, that's a spring-driven clock. And there are two springs in there. Actually, this one has three springs in there that drive the clock. One would drive the time mechanism. One would drive the dinger or the bonging mechanism. And this one happens to have an alarm clock built into it also. So there's another spring for that. A few other things that we have here are the furniture. We talked about this horsehair couch. We have another chair over here, upholstered chair. And small tables. We've got a phonograph in here, and these are all things that you would find in a parlor. And so I think we'll have introduce Carla and have her come and play our pump organ for us. Hi, Carla.
Hi, Ron. How are you today?
Good,
seeing
good.
you.
Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
This is Carla Lambertson, and she's going to be playing our old instruments for us. She's been a member of this society for a long time, longer than I have. And Carla, I thought we would start with the pump organ.
Okay, we'll give it a try.
Let's give him a shot. And,
Okay.
Beautiful, thank you, Carla.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
As you notice, as she was playing, she was pushing on these pedals down here on the floor. And the way this pump organ, and that's the name pump organ, is you're actually pumping the pedals and you're pumping air into some air chambers. And these air chambers will go then through the reeds, and that's what makes the organ play. They've been around forever. Carla, when did they start making pump organs? Do you recall?
Well, at least thousands of years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And I think in the configuration as we see it today, they probably came out somewhere around the mid-1800s, if I remember right. I know they had portable ones that the chaplains would carry around during the Civil War. I've seen those. And so they've been around for a long time. And again, this is something that you can really find today in antique shops and at auctions and things like that. They're not real scarce or rare, and they're not really expensive, and they're kind of fun to play around with. It's something different. And again, we talked earlier about our living back in those times and how hard it was. You didn't plug these in. You had to pump your feet, you know, so you're kind of getting your exercise as you're playing the thing. And you'll find that with the rest of the instruments. So I think in our next segment, we'll go through and take a look at our player piano, and we'll take a look at our melodeon.
Your local business.
Your police department.
Your local business.
Your Village of Oxford.
The schools. Your parks and recreation.
Your community.
Your community.
Only on OC TV.
Here we are, Carla. We're by our player piano, and before we start, we'll explain a few things about it. This, again, has the same pedal operation. You've got a pump on it, and believe me, this is a lot harder than the organ is. You've really got to work at this. After you've played one or two songs, you think you've ran about 5 miles. This roll up here is a paper roll, and the song is actually punched into the paper, if you will. There's little fingers that would follow the paper, and when it hits one of these serrations or holes, it would cause it to strike a key, and you can see this keys moving, and there's little hammers in here which will hit the strings, which of course make the noise in a piano. That's basically their operation, and again, it's hard to play. You know, your legs have really got to be in shape to play 3 or 4 songs on this thing. And we try and do that in a lot of our special occasions here at the museum. So if you would, Carla, we'll let you get going on it.
Then we put it in reverse and you re-roll it. There we go. It's coming.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
very
go.
good, very good. Yeah. You don't really have to be a musician to play this one. You just got to have strong legs. The next instrument we have here is the melodeon, and it kind of operates the same way. It works off of the bellows principle, and it's a little bit different in that you only have one pedal that you push, and you don't have to continually press it. You just have to keep the bellows full of air. And if you would, Carla, we'll go ahead and play this one.
Try. Okay.
Very good. That's the kind of see a different sound of this one. Sounds a little bit more like an organ. And these are the floor instruments that we have here in the museum. Now up on the shelf here, there's a small accordion here. This one's kind of different in that the keys are actually buttons, and they're an exposed reed accordion, whereas today they're more of like a piano, where they have piano keys on one side, and on the bass side they have the buttons that they play. We also have a horn up here, and we have the drum skin from the Oxford City Band. And of course back then every city had a band, and that's a topic we'll talk about in a later section. There's a bandmaster up here. As you can see, the drum major, as you will, he's got his big baton there. And we have a couple photographs here of the city band. That's a couple of the trophies that they won, and that would pretty much take care of all the instruments that we have for this section. We want to thank Carla so much for coming and demonstrating them for us. We really enjoy it. And I think in our next segment that we'll take a look at some of these early phonographs that we have here at the museum and have a fine gentleman come in and explain them and demonstrate them to us.
Canine Stray Rescue is Oxford's own local dog rescue. Each year they take in hundreds of dogs and bring them into suitable homes. A certified nonprofit organization, Canine Dog Rescue strives to give pound dogs a new leash on life. To donate, adopt, or even volunteer, call them at 248-628-0435 or go to their website, dogsaver.org, and click on the Canine Stray Rescue League link. A small town with a lot of heart and history. A hidden gem with a sense of community. Welcome to Leonard.
Hey Rob, how you
Ron,
doing?
how
Good
are
seeing
you?
you.
Good to see you too.
This is Rob Burns, another member of our Historical Society here. He's on the board, he's a trustee. And he's also quite a old photograph aficionado, if you will. So Rob, if you would, let's go ahead and explain this instrument to us and tell us how it works.
All right, thanks, Ron. This is an Edison, this is one of our phonographs on display here. It's a 1905, 1906 Edison home. It's a banner home, actually. These were produced by the Edison Phonograph Company in the early 1900s. And basically they were so popular, the sound was phenomenal on them, but they were one of the machines, phonographs that you could order by mail order, catalog basically. So this machine plays 2-minute cylinders, and let me show you what I have here. These were the cylinders the machine played. And they're wax, and they break very easily. These were 2-minute records, and they introduced the artist in the beginning of the record. And basically, they would lead into the music. So I'm going to play a little bit of this right now. And these were great too, because if you ever heard the term put a sock in it, this is basically how it started out, and you would muffle the sound because there was no volume control for these phonographs. And it basically, it plays on a diamond needle. So this carriage runs along the cylinder. It starts out to the left. The carriage runs along the cylinder, and there's a little wire and a diaphragm, and the diamond needle floats on the record as it plays laterally. So that's where you got this. You got a great sound because it's basically a diamond needle. It's just like your modern stereo system. But the thing that was bad about these is that they started to package these with a heavy box, because what would happen is when they would ship these records out to the stores and the dealers, they'd end up with a bunch of broken records because they're basically all they are is wax. So you have no and the storage of the record too was important too, because you didn't want to put it in anywhere where there was a lot of humidity, because what would happen is you would build up mold on these records. They also came with different size horns too. You could actually remove this horn, remove the crane, and place this horn on the machine itself. So you basically had aftermarket items you could add onto your phonograph if you had the money.
Tell me, Rob, these small horns, they would really be great for a small room, wouldn't they?
They were, Ron, and you could basically switch horns. You could basically get any kind of horn you wanted.
Oh, wow.
To adapt to what, if you had a big room, you could use a concert horn, which actually had a stand.
Wow.
It was probably twice as long as this Morning Glory horn, had an overhead crane and a stand, and it was twice as big as this horn, and you could just basically blast music into a big room.
Did these make as much volume, as much sound as the larger Morning Glory one does?
They do, Ron, and another thing too is that these horns, a lot of the companies made wood horns.
Oh, yeah.
So you would get a really mellow sound coming out of the machine.
Yeah, I imagine the material would make a difference on the sound qualities that came out.
Right.
The metal ones, I think this is metal, isn't it?
Right. This is an original horn too.
Okay, does this have a tinnier sound, if you will, to it?
A little bit.
Yeah.
You know, these horns were painted, they were flowered. Some of them were flowered. They were
I've seen those.
multicolored, and some of them were nickel plated.
Okay.
Completely nickel plated horns. So if you had the money, you could have a beautiful
get whatever
machine.
you wanted.
Get whatever you wanted. So, but these were in such demand that they were. What basically put a little bit of a hurt on the Edison company was when the Victrola came out. The Victor talking machine came out with the Victrola in 1906.
So that was a whole separate company then?
That was a whole separate company,
Okay.
but you had Edison, you had Columbia, and you had the Victor Talking Machine Company, basically the big three.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I've seen different older records and stuff, like they had the Edison Company and Columbia and all the different labels, so
you
I see where that came from.
You basically had, I have a poster at home, and basically you could get probably 20 different models of an Edison phonograph.
Gosh. I don't think we explained it before, but this is actually spring wound and spring driven. There's a large spring in there. You've got a crank on the side. You'd have to crank it up, and as long as the spring had tension on it, that would make the thing play. Once the spring lost the tension, it would start slowing down, and the guy would start talking, or the music would start sounding real foggy, and then it would just quit until you cranked it back up again. So again, it's something you had to do by hand. Everything back then was by hand. There was nothing that was automatic. I think Rob, we could move on. We've got a floor model. Everybody calls them a Victrola, but it's not a Victrola. That's a brand name.
That's a little pet peeve of mine, because I've been a phonograph collector for almost 40 years, and I have 8 machines at home, and there was only one Victrola.
Okay. So we'll walk over to there and take a look at that now. Okay, why don't you come over on this, Rob? Wait, Rob, you can operate this thing, and if you would tell us a little bit about this phonograph.
This was kind of a lead-in for our last discussion on the Victrola, which came out in 1906. Well, a lot of the companies, because of the popularity of the Victrola, they got on board and they started producing phonographs. And this is a Brunswick phonograph, and it was made probably around 1921-22. But the great thing about the different companies is that they came up with these innovative ideas, and one of them Brunswick did was they made this is a reproducer. It's called a reproducer on a phonograph, a reproducer head, which you could turn the head and you could play like this. You could play Pathé lateral records, which you couldn't play unless you had a Pathé machine, or you could turn it this way and have it straight on, and you could play Edison records. So you had three different choices to play different types of music on your phonograph.
Does that mean, Rob, that if you had an Edison record, you had to play it on an Edison machine?
Basically, you did, because the Edison record, this is basic 78s will play Hill and Dale. Okay, so you write this needle's riding the grooves. An Edison record plays with a diamond needle and it plays laterally, so the whole tone arm moves like this, as the needle, as in the cylinder machine, rides along the grooves of the
Okay.
record. So,
Huh.
but that's what was great about this Brunswick machine. And the kids get a kick out of this too, because any kind of phonograph, when they come in on tours in here, they've never experienced this stuff. You know,
Yeah.
you know, and when we always talk about, this is before iPods, before anything else. This is, if you were lucky enough and, you know, had the money to afford one of these machines, you could listen to music. Here, and give it a few cranks.
As you notice, he's cranking this thing up again. Everything was by hand.
Right.
The big spring in here that made the thing operate.
Now this is another one of I'm actually playing a Brunswick record from the time period, so this is just me, okay? I don't like to play records that don't go with the machine.
Okay.
They didn't start recording electrically until 1925. Everything prior to that was acoustic recordings. So you basically had a big horn, you had a band in front of a horn, and there was an acoustic recording, which this is an acoustic machine, so, but it still sounds good. The great thing about this is a killer. I'm going to stop this for a second. You know, usually on a lot of phonographs you would have a louvered door, or you would have doors that open. Okay, that's how you control, because the horn, this is an internal horn. The tone arm comes around, the horn wraps around at the bottom. So this was your volume control coming out of here.
Opening and closing the doors.
So with this machine, which was great, this knob on the side, here's your volume control.
I never knew the different records played on different machines. That's really interesting.
In fact, we're going to just play a little bit of this. This is an Edison record. So we have to turn the reproducer head like this, and we have to turn around this way so it's straight. We'll crank it up. Now you're playing an Edison record.
That's amazing. Okay, Rob, I certainly want to thank you for coming in today. I certainly appreciate the information on these old phonographs. They're really cool. And again, these are not really all that rare. You can find these pretty much. But that pretty much will take care of it for this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Goodbye.
You're watching Oxford Community Television, keeping it local.